Jailed, 4 men are behind bars over an insurance scam which led to the death of an innocent pensioner.
And rank bad. The taxi drivers protest over claims that deregulated licensing laws are causing chaos. But first tonight, some of the families involved in the Tunisia terror attack, which claimed the lives of 6 people from our region, are considering a civil case against the travel company.
The announcement came on the day the inquests into their deaths finished, with the coroner ruling all 30 British victims had been unlawfully killed.
Although the coroner rejected calls that neglect by the travel firm or hotel owners played a role in the tragedy, lawyers say the whole travel industry needs to learn lessons from what happened in Sousse. Lisa Adlam has our main story.
The moment a lone gunman brought terror and carnage to a Tunisian beach, killing 38 people, 30 of them British tourists. Each one unlawfully killed, a coroner ruled today, including 6 people from our region shot on the beach at Sousse or in their 5-star hotel where Islamic extremist Sefeddin Rezgui had pursued them. Among them, 58-year-old social worker John Stollery from Wellesby near Newark. He was on holiday with his wife Cheryl and son Matthew and was shot as they tried to flee. Today, Mrs. Stollery said they wouldn't have travelled to Tunisia if she'd been given more information about the risks.
That if I had been provided with the terrorist information, the descriptors, at the time that I'd gone into book, then I wouldn't have been booking a holiday to Tunisia. That's without doubt.
But the coroner, Judge Nicholas Lorraine Smith, rejected calls from some of the victims' families to conclude that neglect by travel firm TUI or the hotel owners played a part in the killings. He did, however, criticise the Tunisian police for deliberately delaying their response to the attack, arriving at the scene 30 minutes after the alarm was raised. It was at best shambolic and at worst cowardly, he said. At the end of the inquests at the Royal Courts of Justice, relatives of many of those killed announced they now plan to sue the tour operator.
On behalf of our clients who lost members of their family and those who suffered injuries in this terrible incident, we will now be preparing to commence civil proceedings against TUI. The inquests were about those who tragically lost their lives. They must never be forgotten, and their families hope that no one else will ever have to suffer the same fate in the future.
3 months before the Sousse attacks, 20 tourists had been killed by terrorists at a museum in the Tunisian capital. Judge Lorraine Smith said today some holidaymakers had been reassured about the safety of the country before they travelled.
The coroner talked about the way travel advice should be provided, and since then we've now got travel advice, the link to the FCO campaign, on virtually every one of our pages on the website, in our brochure, in all of our communication with customers. On behalf of everyone at TUI UK, I would like to again extend our deepest sympathy. We are so very sorry for the pain and loss those affected have suffered.
The Foreign Office now advises against all but essential travel to Tunisia. Lisa Adlam, ITV News.
The sister of Joe Cox has spoken for the first time of how much the MP's murder has changed her family's life forever.
Mrs Cox was shot and stabbed to death on the streets of her own constituency in Birstall last June. Her killer, Thomas Mayer, who was 53, was jailed for life in November.
Well, last week, Kim Ledby helped to launch the Joe Cox Great Get-Together, a series of street parties to mark the anniversary of her sister's death.
But today, in her first in-depth interview, she's spoken to Christine about the pain of the last 8 months and why life will never be normal for her family again.
Wasn't it good?
Relaxed, happy and performing the party piece they'd sung together all their lives. Joe Cox and her sister Kim celebrating Kim's 40th birthday last year. But just 6 weeks later, Jo was dead, murdered on the streets of Birstall as she went to talk to constituents at the local library. It was a brutal death that has devastated all who loved her.
My life has changed forever.
And I don't think there's any ways it hasn't changed. And I don't actually remember a great deal about summer. And I remember a lot of people being really, really lovely and really kind. And I remember just flowers arriving and cards arriving and Jo being on the TV all the time. I've never felt I've been in denial about what's happened. But I actually still don't think I've processed what's happened. Jo was the best sister I could have hoped for, and just such a lovely person. And what's interesting is, you know, people have said so much good stuff about Jo since she was killed, and actually it's all true. There's nothing, you wouldn't find anything bad to say about Jo because she was a good person. Now, I'm not saying she was a saint, you know, no one's pretending that. She was annoying on occasions, but Jo's heart was just full of goodness and full of kindness, and all Jo wanted to do was to help people and to just change things for the good. And that's what Jo was like all our lives, actually.
Oh, she did look like a mum, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Look at this. We were brought up, I would say, there's 2 years age difference, obviously me being the younger, which nobody ever believes because Jo looked so young. But we were brought up very, very much on the same level, so we did everything together, whether it was going to the Brownies or whether it was dancing class or getting out on our BMXs or whatever, we did it all together. But Jo really lacked confidence. This is what makes me so proud of her, that when we were kids, I would be the one who would always be the bossy one and the one that was in charge, and I would and Jo was actually very shy. So for Jo to achieve what she did was much harder than probably anybody could have imagined.
I look forward to representing the great people of Batley and Spen here over the next 5 years. Thank you.
After years working and living away, Jo's sister and parents were thrilled when she became MP for Batley and Spen in 2015.
And, you know, we were just starting to see more of each other. And the kids were coming up more regularly, which was really lovely as well, and that's just so important. So the week before Jo was killed, she came round here, and it was classic Jo. So no food, nothing to wear, and no money. So she walked through the door, she was shattered. So she just took her dress off and she said, "Can I borrow some clothes?" So we put one of my hoodies on and some pyjama bottoms, I think, and she just got in the chair and just snuggled up nice and cosy. And
so your memories of Jo were snuggled up on your sofa, wearing your hoodie. Yeah, really positive memories, actually. And I guess I'm really lucky in that my relationship with Jo was always so strong. What is the worst thing about it for you now, though?
I think when you think about Jo's children, that's obviously the real heartbreaking, really, really difficult side of things. And I've had more contact with them than I've ever had in the past few months, which has been absolutely lovely. But then you've got there's a guilt associated with that as well. So I went down, and Brendan was overseas on a work trip, so I went down and looked after the kids for a few nights. So I'm running on the banks of the River Thames like, oh, I can't wait to see the kids. And then I just suddenly stopped and I thought, what are you doing? How dare you? How dare you be so excited to see those children? They're not your children. This is not your life. This is Jo's life, and you should not be doing this. And then you kind of have to stop yourself and think, right, that's not an option. It's not an option for Jo to be here looking after her kids. And that's what I would want. I would want my life back. And I would want my boring life back in my 3-bed semi in Gummersall, just being normal. But that isn't an option anymore.
So, along with treasuring her precious memories, the only option for Kim and Jo's family is to continue Jo's legacy, to promote her passionate wish to unite communities and help others.
What happened, and we've sort of been thrust into the spotlight for the worst possible reason. And I know people will say, yeah, but you don't have to, you could just go back to normality. But there isn't a normality anymore for me, because when you lose somebody, and other people will relate to this, so close to you, you can't go back to normal, because normal doesn't exist anymore.
speak to the sister of Joe Cox, talking about life without Joe 8 months on.
Do stay with us, still to come on the programme this evening. Mobile danger. Motorists are warned about the new law enforced tomorrow, which will crack down on those who drive and talk.
And there was a definite taste of winter for some this morning, but when the sun came out, it felt like spring. What are the prospects for the next 24 hours and an outlook for the weekend? Join me soon for a detailed forecast.
Well, next tonight, 4 men have been jailed for a total of 37 years over a so-called crash for cash insurance plot, which led to the death of an innocent pensioner.
Great-grandmother Betty Laird died from terrible injuries when a car was deliberately driven into the side of the car she was a front-seat passenger in.
The fraudsters hope to con thousands in insurance payouts, claiming they were the victims. But tonight, they're behind bars after a trial where there were repeated attempts to bribe members of the jury. John Hill reports.
It's a crash, but it's no accident. This is a crash for cash. Unheard of a few years ago, this is now a scam that's robbing law-abiding motorists of money and, in some cases, their life. There's no video of the crash that led to the death of Betty Laird, but she was simply one of the latest victims of what is organised crime. 88-year-old Betty was a passenger in the car of her friend, Jeff Grimshaw. Jeff was 77. Betty and Jeff were turning into the entrance to this co-op store in Beeston in Leeds when another car drove straight into theirs.
There were frantic scenes. Betty suffered numerous serious injuries. Still conscious, she told people who came to help that she feared she was going to die. 4 hours later, she lost her fight for life. A few days later, Jeff also died. His death was said to be unrelated, but his family are convinced that he died believing he'd caused his friend's death. But Jeff was wrong.
These men had deliberately plotted to drive into Betty and Jeff's car, their aim to claim they were the victims. Today, Sabah Hussain was jailed for 12 years and Raja Hussain for 15 years after being found guilty of manslaughter and fraud. Mohammed Ubaidullah was sentenced to 6.5 years after admitting manslaughter and other charges. Sharia Islam Mia was jailed for 4 years for fraud.
It is clear that these men set out that day to deliberately cause a crash. Their actions tragically cost Betty Laird her life and left her family absolutely devastated.
What made this case perhaps even more extraordinary was that during the course of the trial there were 3 separate attempts to bribe members of the jury once they'd left the court building here in Leeds. People came up to jurors on the street and offered them £500 to return a particular verdict in the case. Well, the jurors were understandably disconcerted and told the judge what had happened. And for only the 3rd time in English legal history, he took the decision to discharge the jury completely and hear the rest of the case himself. There's now a separate police investigation into alleged jury tampering.
Passing sentence, Mr Justice Goss said it was a terrible end to Betty Laird's life, and it is sure she suffered at the end. To be killed for reasons of callous, dishonest financial greed is shocking. Betty Laird's family are now left with memories, but also the terrible knowledge of her violent death at the hands of a gang who simply didn't care whether she lived or died. John Hill, ITV News.
Well, next tonight, taxi drivers in South Yorkshire paraded around Sheffield today as part of a national day of protest over changes to licensing rules they say have created a Wild West working environment.
Well, since government deregulation, taxis from other locations are allowed to operate in areas other than where they were originally licensed. Here's Martin Fisher.
Sheffield taxi drivers on the move as this protest rolls through the city. It's response to the deregulation of the industry, meaning licences granted in other areas can be used in Sheffield. But taxi drivers like Ian Barley claim that creates an unfair system.
We're very angry because what's the point of us passing a Sheffield test, doing everything above board, buying the vehicle when we see, a 15-year-old car coming in from elsewhere doing the same work.
Ian's concerned that authorities in Sheffield can't check taxis from other areas.
If anything goes wrong in my taxi or any taxi in Sheffield, we've got a number at the side of us and there's a phone number for Sheffield licensing.
Taxi drivers took their protest to Sheffield Council today. The Department for Transport says problems should be dealt with locally. The council doesn't agree.
It's not for us to deal with, it's the legislation that's a problem. The new legislation they brought in under the Police and Crime Act has caused a problem and it needs to be changed.
It's thought in Sheffield more than 700 city drivers are licensed by other authorities.
Unregulated drivers are coming into our area, taking our jobs and stealing from us and stealing from the people of Sheffield, because that's the licensing fee that needs to come to this council.
Drivers who license here, they have to obey the law. But them coming from outside, that's risk for public.
I pay licence fees to Sheffield City Council. I'm licensed by them. I have to adhere to all the rules and regulations.
You get drivers from other parts of England coming, for example in Sheffield. They don't know where they're going, they don't know what they're doing.
So a free market or a dangerous free-for-all? Taxis in South Yorkshire at least determined to show how they feel. Martin Fisher, ITV News in Sheffield.
Well, guards and drivers working for Arriva Rail North have voted for industrial action next month. The rail union, the RMT, says its members are taking one-day strike action from just after midnight on Monday, March the 13th, in an argument over the future role of guards. The union accused the company of intransigence, but a spokesman for Northern said that they wanted a constructive resolution, as well as protecting jobs and pay.
Well, now, the warning to drivers ahead of a law change tomorrow: if you get caught using your mobile phone behind the wheel, you could lose your licence.
Yes, from midnight, the penalty for doing just that increases to 6 penalty points and a £200 fine.
Well, road safety campaigners hope the law changes will act as a deterrent and it goes some way to reducing fatalities on the region's roads. Matt Price has more.
17-year-old Finley only passed his test a few weeks ago. A new driver with new laws to learn. From midnight, those caught using a mobile phone at the wheel face tougher punishments. It's something Finley's instructor has warned him about.
You use your mobile phone, you'll lose your car, because it's against the law to use the mobile phone in the car. He'd turn his off as soon as the lesson started.
Inexperienced drivers are being warned that one mistake could cost them their newfound independence. 6 points and a £200 fine is enough for new drivers to have their licence revoked. Road safety campaigners say it's the risk of killing someone, though, that should be the main deterrent.
If you're young and you're texting behind the wheel, you're 4 times more likely to be involved in a fatal or serious crash. Too many people are losing their lives, are being seriously injured, and they're young and they're vulnerable drivers.
But are drivers in support of a change to the law?
I think that's right, because when you're on your mobile phone you get really distracted.
I think it's a good idea. I think, yeah, it needs to be stricter. People still doing it and it's very dangerous.
6 points on my licence, 200 should be more.
No. Finley uses his car's inbuilt phone so that he can legally take calls while on the move.
Hi, sweetheart. Are you on your way to college?
Yeah.
For him, it's irresponsible if other motorists don't do the same.
Angry, annoyed, because everyone can get a hands-free kit for their car, but people don't choose to use them.
Well, Matt's on one of West Yorkshire's busiest A roads right now. Despite the warnings, Matt, drivers are still using phones at the wheel?
Sadly so, yeah. We were here for about 20 minutes a little bit earlier on today and counted a handful of drivers who were still using their mobile phones to text and use them as handheld satellite navigation systems. You know, doing some research on this today, and one report from the RAC claims a third of drivers, 31% of them, still admit to regularly using their handheld mobile phones. I think road safety campaigners will hope this new law change acts as a deterrent, as you say, to stop people using their phones at the wheel, but also goes some way to saving lives on roads right across the Callander region.
Indeed.
Time for the weather now with John.
Yes, it's the last day of February. And that means it's the end of meteorological winter. It's the first day of meteorological spring tomorrow. Does the weather know? No, it doesn't. It carries on regardless. This was a scene up at Keighley Tarn earlier on this morning. A nice, lovely dusting of snow there, a real wintry scene. And this was the scene up at Home Moss, just down the road. A heavy snow shower there, obliterating Home Moss itself. A light dusting of snow, really. But the heavy snow showers can be quite dramatic when they come, reducing visibility quite dramatically there. That was Sheffield yesterday, tea time. Here's today's precipitation radar. I'll say precipitation radar because it shows up hail, sleet and snow as well as rain. You can see we missed most of them today, but they are beginning to come in now. I'll have the forecast, of course, fairly soon. But this was the sky over Rotherham earlier today. Cumulus clouds beginning to develop there now because the sun is beginning to gain strength. So there we are, that's it.
Excellent.
Right, so snow on the way.
A little bit on the top.
We'll see you later.
Yes, of course you will.
Thanks very much, John. Now, you may not remember her name, but chances are you will remember her voice.
Sam Bailey won the X Factor back in 2013 and enjoyed huge success with her debut single and album.
Now, 3 years on, she's preparing to go out on tour and will be stopping off in Yorkshire and Lincolnshire later, as Lauren Hall now reports.
'Cause I'm your lady. With that voice, it's hardly surprising she went on to win the 10th series of the X Factor.
The winner of the X Factor 2013 is Sam.
All I ever wanted from the show was to be on it for 5 seconds, so that when I went out and did my little gigs at the Dog and Duck, I got an extra 50 quid for the gig because it says in brackets that I've been on the X Factor. That's all I wanted to do it for. And then next thing you know, I only go and blimmin' win it.
Sam Bailey's debut single ended up at Christmas #1, and her album topped the charts the following year.
The X Factor gave me something pretty special, and it doesn't matter how many people slate the show or slate Simon Cowell, it does change people's lives.
3 years on, life may have changed, but she says she's still very much the same person.
I'm me, and I'll always sustain that. I won't change for nobody. And when it comes to, you know, being in the public eye, I think the general public would prefer you to be yourself, to try and be something, not to try and be something that you're not.
She's no longer with Simon Cowell's record label, but Sam is still performing. She's getting ready for her Sing My Heart Out tour.
I get this sort of sense that, a warm feeling that, you know, people still feel that I'm relevant enough to come and see me. It's just me on stage with a wonderful band, wonderful backing singers and some great people in the audience, and then we just have a bit of fun. So I'm looking forward to it.
That's not all she has to look forward to, as this mum of 3 is getting ready to celebrate the big 40.
People go, oh my gosh, I'm really old, I'm 40. And I'm like, well, no, I don't feel like that. And I'm only 40 and I've got plenty of years ahead of me. I really want to get into a little bit of songwriting. I want to do some tours and do some musicals. You know, I want to get my fingers in loads of different pies.
There's still a lot she wants to do, but on her upcoming tour, she'll be doing what she does best. Like a skyscraper. Not bad for someone who only went on the X Factor for 5 minutes of fame. Lauren Hall, ITV News.
I think Lauren knows. She went on the X Factor to get that extra 50 quid on the bill every night. She said that. She said that.
She did. Remember, we met at the Leeds Light. She was really nice.
Lovely lady,
she?
lovely lady.
Here's John.
First Choice sponsors ITV Yorkshire weather.
Hello again. I think most of us escaped with a dry day today. Some nice spells of sunshine around. This was waiting for a train at Wakefield Westgate earlier on this morning, and some lovely cumulus clouds at Norton in the Vale of Pickering over North Yorkshire today. Now, the air's leaking down from the Arctic at the moment, so it's quite cold air, and there's areas of rain and showers out there to the west coming our way for this evening. So as we head through this evening, they could fall as sleet or snow up over the High Pennines for a time, but around midnight they will clear away southwards. Some good extended cloud breaks developing for the second half of the night. That will allow temperatures to fall away to around 0 Celsius, maybe just a little bit lower. So icy patches again, always a possibility during tonight. There's this morning's lovely sunrise just outside Doncaster. Tomorrow the sun's up at 6:54, setting again at 5:43 tomorrow evening. Tomorrow then, a fair amount of sunshine around during the course of the day, cloud coming and going, a scattering of showers as you can see, especially north of the Humber, north of the Calder, shall we say, the driest of the weather, the brightest of the weather further south. So a bit of a mixed showery bag and a top temperature of 7 or 8 Celsius. Now tomorrow night, an area of rain moving up from the south will come up against that cold air again. That could fall as snow for a time over the Peak District and the Pennines. But that's tomorrow night. We'll firm up on that tomorrow for sure. But in the outlook, the weather's not brilliant, I have to say. Some sunshine around on Thursday for sure. Friday tending to cloud up, and at the moment Saturday looks like a cloudy and a wet day. That's your forecast. Do enjoy the rest of your evening.
First Choice sponsors ITV Yorkshire Weather.
Thanks very much, John. That's just about it from us. Our next update's just after 11 o'clock.
Yes, the national and international stories will be coming up shortly with Mary Nightingale.
But for now, from the whole team here on Calendar, thanks very much indeed for watching. Tomorrow night at 6. See you then.
Bye-bye.